Sarah stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, her fingers trembling as they traced the purple bruises wrapped around her wrists like dark bracelets. The marks were fresh, tender to the touch, and unmistakably real. Yet everyone, her husband, her sister, even her own therapist, insisted they weren't there. "You're imagining things again," Dr. Martinez had said just hours earlier, his voice dripping with professional concern. The medication should help with these episodes. But Sarah knew what she felt. The throbbing pain that shot through her arms when she moved. The way her skin burned when fabric brushed against the tender flesh. These weren't hallucinations. These weren't the product of a fractured mind desperately trying to make sense of trauma that never happened. She pressed her palms against the cold porcelain sink, watching her knuckles turn white. In the mirror, her eyes looked hollow, haunted by a truth no one else could see. The bruises were real. Which meant everything else she remembered might be real too. The question that had been clawing at her mind for weeks suddenly crystallized into terrifying clarity. If her memories were fake, then who had hurt her? And why was everyone so desperate to make her believe otherwise? 3 months earlier, Sarah had awakened in a hospital bed with no memory of how she'd gotten there. The doctors spoke in hushed tones about a severe psychological break and dissociative episodes. Her husband Marcus sat beside her, his face etched with worry that seemed almost too perfect, too rehearsed. He explained that she'd been found wandering downtown in the middle of the night, confused and disoriented, talking about people who didn't exist and events that had never happened. "You kept saying someone was chasing you," he said, his hand squeezing hers with gentle pressure. "But sweetheart, you were alone. The security cameras showed you walking by yourself." Sarah wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust the man she'd married 5 years ago, the one who brought her flowers every Friday and never raised his voice. But something felt wrong. Something in the way his eyes darted away when she asked specific questions. Something in the way he seemed to have all the answers before she even asked. The psychological thriller was just beginning to unfold, and Sarah was the unreliable narrator of her own twisted story. Dr. Martinez prescribed a cocktail of medications designed to quiet the dark secrets her mind insisted on creating. False memory syndrome, he called it, adjusting his glasses with clinical precision. Your brain is essentially manufacturing experiences to fill gaps in your recollection. It's more common than you'd think. But the pills made everything worse. They dulled the sharp edges of her thoughts, made her feel like she was viewing the world through thick glass. Worst of all, they made her doubt herself. When she'd wake up with mysterious scrapes on her arms or find her clothes in the hamper stained with dirt she couldn't remember getting, Marcus would gently remind her about her episodes. "You were gardening yesterday," he'd say, showing her photos on his phone of her kneeling in flower beds she didn't remember planting. "Don't you remember? You were so happy." The pictures looked real. Her smile in them seemed genuine. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was looking at a stranger wearing her face. Each photograph felt like evidence of a life she wasn't living, memories implanted by someone else's design. The mind-bending story was becoming her reality, and she was losing the ability to distinguish between what was real and what was manufactured. Sarah began keeping a secret journal, hidden beneath her mattress like a teenager concealing diary entries from prying parents. She wrote down everything, every bruise, every unexplained mark, every moment when reality felt shifted and wrong. The entries painted a disturbing picture of a woman slowly losing time, finding herself in places she didn't remember going, wearing clothes she didn't remember choosing. Tuesday, woke up with mud under my fingernails. Marcus says I was planting tomatoes, but I hate tomatoes. Why would I plant something I hate? Friday, found a business card in my purse for a divorce lawyer. When I asked Marcus about it, he looked confused and concerned. He suggested I might have picked it up during another episode. Sunday, the neighbors, Mrs. Chen, asked how I was healing from my accident. What accident? When I asked Marcus, he said Mrs. Chen was mistaken. But her face, she looked frightened when she saw me. Each entry was a breadcrumb and a trail Sarah was desperately trying to follow, even as everyone around her insisted the path didn't exist. The psychological conflict was tearing her apart from the inside, making her question the very foundation of her own existence. The breakthrough came when Sarah discovered a hidden camera in her bedroom, tucked behind a picture frame that had been slightly askew for weeks. Her hands shook as she examined the tiny device, its red recording light blinking like a mechanical eye. This wasn't a security camera, it was positioned to capture the bed, the dresser, intimate moments that should have been private. When she confronted Marcus, his reaction was immediate and visceral. His usual calm demeanor cracked, revealing something darker underneath. "You planted that," he said, his voice taking on an edge she'd never heard before. "You're paranoid, Sarah. You're sick." But Sarah had seen the timestamp on the device's memory card. It had been recording for months, long before her supposed breakdown. She'd found evidence of her own surveillance, proof that her every movement was being monitored and documented. The question that haunted her wasn't whether she was being watched, it was who was watching, and why. That night, she pretended to take her medication, palming the pills and hiding them in her cheek until Marcus left the room. For the first time in months, her mind felt clear. And in that clarity, she began to remember things that made her blood run cold. The memories came back in fragments, like pieces of a shattered mirror slowly reassembling themselves. Sarah remembered fighting with Marcus about divorce papers she'd hidden in her car. She remembered him grabbing her wrists, his fingers digging into her skin hard enough to leave marks. She remembered falling down the stairs, not by accident, but because someone had pushed her. But the most chilling memory was of Dr. Martinez in the living room, not his office, speaking in hushed tones with Marcus about the treatment plan and keeping her compliant. She remembered hiding in the hallway, listening to them discuss her medication dosages and how to manage her delusions about wanting to leave her marriage. "She's becoming suspicious," she remembered Dr. Martinez saying. "We may need to consider more aggressive intervention." The bruises on her wrists weren't from mysterious episodes or psychological breaks. They were from her husband's hands, from fights she was being drugged to forget. The unreliable narrator wasn't Sarah's damaged mind, it was the constructed reality being fed to her by the people she trusted most. Every false memory was actually a real memory fighting to surface through a pharmaceutical haze designed to keep her trapped and silent. Sarah realized she wasn't just fighting for her memories, she was fighting for her life. The treatment wasn't helping her heal, it was systematically destroying her ability to trust her own perceptions. Marcus and Dr. Martinez weren't her caregivers, they were her captors, using her own mind as a prison. She began secretly recording conversations, hiding a small device in her jewelry box. What she captured was devastating: Marcus and Dr. Martinez discussing how to increase her medication, how to discredit her if she tried to leave, how to make her dependent on them for her own sense of reality. They talked about her like she was a problem to be solved, not a person to be helped. "She's starting to resist the medication." Dr. Martinez's voice was clinical, detached. "We might need to consider involuntary commitment if she becomes too difficult to manage." The psychological thriller had become a horror story of gaslighting and medical abuse. Sarah was trapped in a web of lies so intricate that even her own perception of reality had been weaponized against her. But now she knew the truth, and she had evidence. The question was whether she could escape before they realized she remembered everything. The plot twist came when Sarah discovered she wasn't the first. Hidden in Dr. Martinez's files, which she'd accessed during a scheduled appointment while he stepped out, were records of other women. 3 other patients, all married, all diagnosed with severe dissociative episodes and false memory syndrome. All of them had been prescribed the same medication cocktail. All of them had husbands who were remarkably involved in their treatment. and all of them had died by suicide within 18 months of their initial diagnosis. Sarah's blood turned to ice as she read the clinical notes. The pattern was identical: women who wanted to leave their marriages, who began experiencing episodes, who became increasingly dependent on medication and their husband's care. The final notes in each file mentioned treatment failure and tragic outcomes, but Sarah could read between the lines. These women had been murdered, psychologically first, then physically. She was meant to be the fourth. The bruises on her wrists weren't just from fights, they were from practice sessions, Marcus learning how to make her death look like a suicide. The medication wasn't just making her forget, it was preparing her to be the next tragic case in Dr. Martinez's files. Sarah's escape plan had to be flawless. She couldn't simply run. Marcus had isolated her from friends and family, convinced them she was mentally unstable. Dr. Martinez held the power to have her committed if she tried to expose the truth. She needed irrefutable evidence and a way to get it to someone who would believe her. She began secretly filming everything, documenting the bruises, recording conversations, copying files. But the twisted story took another turn when she realized Marcus knew she was remembering. He'd been watching her more closely, checking her pills, monitoring her behavior. The hidden camera in the bedroom was just one of many. Their entire house was a surveillance system. "You're not taking your medication," he said one evening, his voice carrying a threat disguised as concern. "Dr. Martinez thinks you might need to stay at the facility for a while. Just until you're feeling better." The facility, where the other women had died. Sarah realized she was out of time. That night, she would either escape or become another suicide in Dr. Martinez's files. The psychological conflict had reached its breaking point, and only one of them would survive to tell the truth. The final confrontation happened in their kitchen at 2 a.m. Sarah had pretended to be asleep, waiting for Marcus to come check on her. When he entered the bedroom, she wasn't there. Instead, she was in the kitchen, with copies of all the evidence spread across the table: the surveillance footage, the medication records, the files on the other victims. "You killed them," she said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "You and Dr. Martinez. You've been killing women who wanted to leave their marriages." Marcus's mask finally slipped completely. The concerned husband disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You're having another episode, Sarah. No one will believe you." But Sarah had one final twist. She'd already uploaded everything to a secure cloud server, set to automatically send to law enforcement and journalists if she didn't check in every 12 hours. The evidence was beyond his reach now. The mystery unraveled as police sirens wailed in the distance. Sarah had called them before the confrontation, knowing Marcus would try to kill her that night. The bruises on her wrists were real. Her memories were real. And now, finally, everyone would know the truth. Sarah's story ended with justice, but it began with a woman brave enough to trust her own perceptions when everyone else told her she was wrong. The psychological thriller of her experience reveals how easily reality can be manipulated, how trust can be weaponized, and how the human mind can be turned into a prison by those who claim to care for us. The most chilling aspect of this twisted story isn't the surveillance or the medication, it's how completely Marcus and Dr. Martinez had convinced everyone, including Sarah herself, that her memories were fabrications. They used her own mind against her, making her question the very foundation of her existence. What do you think? Could something like this really happen? Have you ever felt like everyone around you was seeing a different reality than you were? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing your theories about these dark secrets that lurk beneath the surface of ordinary life. If this mind-bending story left you questioning what's real and what's not, hit that like button and subscribe for more psychological thrillers that will keep you up at night. There are more stories like this waiting to be told, more mysteries to unravel, and more twisted truths hiding in plain sight. Until next time, stay kind, stay sharp, and stay curious.